Thank you all for joining us for Supplemental Security Income SSI, an overview of benefits and work incentives for those with disabilities on Wednesday the 13th at noon, presented by Richard. This disclaimer, the ARC of Lehigh Northampton County's Advocacy Department does not employ lawyers nor provide legal advice. This training or any others provided by the ARC's Advocacy Department does not constitute or imply the endorsement, recommendations, or favoring of the providing party or any employees or contractors acting on its behalf. This webinar is being provided for educational and informative purposes only. Stop sharing that one. And thank you. And it is my pleasure to introduce Richard, from a public affairs specialist from the Social Security Administration Office. So thank you, and the Zoom is yours.
Hi, folks. Well, good afternoon to you all. I hope you're doing well. And we're going to talk about disability benefits under the Supplemental Security Income SSI program. As Cody mentioned last Wednesday, we did benefits under Social Security. So again, just as last week, we're going to go through a lot of information here. Just don't worry, you're going to get every single thing at the moment, because between our website and you'll have the PowerPoint, and I'll be available to folks if they have questions later. So it'll all be good. Okay, so we'll go next one. All right, folks, as I said, we're going to talk about Supplemental Security Income, SSI, and we're going to specifically talk about the eligibility factors and then the application process. So that will get somebody on from the jump, how they get on benefits. And then the bottom two bullets, the second half basically, or the last portion of the presentation, will be about work incentives for people who are already on this SSI, and then the Ticket to Work program. So that's where we're going to go. Okay, so go ahead, Cody. So Supplemental Security Income SSI is a needs-based program, which for people who qualify, it provides a cash benefit on the first day of every month. In the state of Pennsylvania, when the person gets SSI, automatically they get Medicaid from the state. The state of Pennsylvania accepts our decisions on people entitled to SSI, and Medicaid comes with it. In some states, you actually have to fill out a separate application for Medicaid, but not here in PA. And the people who can get SSI are basically fall into two categories. Folks who are 65 and older, they would get it strictly on the basis of age. They do not have to meet any disability requirement. And then anybody younger than 65, both adults and children, they would have to be someone who's found to have a disability. Unlike Social Security, there is no work requirement for SSI. It's strictly a needs-based program. But you do have to meet then the income and what we call resource limits or asset limits. We'll talk about those. And living arrangements are a factor of entitlement. It comes into play with SSI. We get into how many people live in the household, who's the head of the household. Not so much does it come into play for children, those under 18, but adults 18 and older, living arrangements is something that is a factor of entitlement. And the state of Pennsylvania usually contributes something towards the benefit. So there's two separate checks. One would come from the federal government on the first of the month, and then the state benefit would come from the state same day. Okay. Right now, the monthly SSI payment, as I said, comes out on the first of the month. The maximum payment from the federal government, that federal portion, is $914. If the individual doesn't have what we call chargeable income, which would be some type of income which would eat into the SSI. So if they have no other income and they're due the full benefit, it would be $914. If a person has some other income that is chargeable, that we would say is countable income, we will bring the combined total between that other income and SSI to a figure that's $20 higher, to $934. So the example is someone gets $700, let's say, in Social Security, and they have no other income, they're due SSI full benefit. They would then get $234 in SSI, which you see brings them to a total of $934, which is $20 more than someone who just gets SSI only. Okay, so really, in some ways, the SSI limit in some ways is $934, really. So go ahead, Cody, we'll go to 5. Now, I don't know how many of the parents here have children under 18. because we do, our category is that is a child, as opposed to as soon as someone turns 18, the first full month, they're considered to be an adult. But so just briefly, I want to talk about income for children under 18 in terms of the family. There's a principle called deeming, where if a child who is under 18 who's going to get SSI lives with one or both parents, then those parents, their income and resources or assets are considered in the computation, and in fact determine in some ways whether the child can get SSI. So most types of income counts, except parental income based on need for existence. For example, if the parent or parents are receiving public assistance, that type of income does not count against SSI. But if the parent will be working or have some other type of income, then it's going to figure in the family mix. Deeming stops the month after the child turns 18. So sometimes we have children who are 16, 17, and they would meet the disability requirements for SSI, but because the family income is such, they might not be eligible before 18. Once they turn 18, it's a different ballgame. We do not care what income and assets the parents have. So then a child who would be denied at 16, 17 because of family income can come back later on and file at 18, and doesn't matter what the parents have. Okay. So in deeming income from a parent to a minor child, we recognize that a parent may have multiple children and they have responsibility to support all the children in the household. So the fact that there are other children who are not involved with SSI obviously need to be supported, and some of the income is going to go towards those children, then that is considered in the computation. And just to give you an example, the example here is for a single working parent who has one child on SSI. If there are no other children in the household and that single parent is working, that's their only income, the earnings limit for that parent is $3,781 for a month, $3,781. We do all our calculations for SSI on a month-to-month basis, but I just put there the yearly total for $3,781 a month, just to give you an idea of how much that is over the course of a year. It's a little bit over $45,000. If there's another child in the household, the earnings limit is increased by a little over $4,200 more a month, and therefore that parent could be working and making up to $50,856 for a year. But again, if we want to do it on a yearly basis. So just to give you an idea that any additional children that are in the household, that of course raises the income allowance that the parent could have if they're working. Now, if they're not working, have some other type of income, it's the same principle that, for each child, we understand that the parent has to support all the children in the household. Okay, so go ahead, Cody. We'll go to 7. We mentioned that in addition to the income limit, there's a resource limit. So resources or assets are, for example, cash, money in the bank, any type of investments, bonds, stocks. It says non-home property. That means if a person either owns a house or is buying a house, paying a mortgage, it does not matter what the value of that house is, but if they have property elsewhere called non-home property, then the value of that property elsewhere does count against the resource limit. And the limit is not very high, has not changed in a long time. The adult or child has a $2,000 limit. The SSI recipient would be allowed to have up to $2,000 in resources. In children's cases, the parents also have an allotment too. So if there was one child on SSI and they're living with one parent, then that parent is also allowed $2,000. So a lot of times, of course, minor children, they don't have any assets. So in that case, in most cases, a child has no asset. Well, then if it's a parent and one child on SSI, then that $2,000 that will be allotted for the child is sort of passed over to the parent, and the parent would have a $4,000 limit. Okay. And then if there's two parents, the parents have a $3,000 limit. Again, if there's no resources for the child, then that would be $5,000 in total will be passed on towards the resource limit. Somebody I see posted a question about the chat about ABLE accounts. If a SSI recipient has an ABLE account, we can exclude up to $100,000 that's in the ABLE account against SSI. So $100,000 would not count. If that individual had $103,000 in the account, the ABLE account, then that $3,000 would count because it's over the $100,000 allowable limit. Okay. Okay, we'll go to 8, Cody. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the definition of disability. We're going to talk for adults here because I think most of the parents have children that are 18 plus. So we're going to talk a little bit. I'm going to mention the child determination in just a bit. But for adults, the individual has to have a physical or mental impairment that either has lasted or is expected to last at least 12 months or result in the individual's death. And in addition to having a duration of 12 months, the impairment must prevent the individual from working at what we call a substantial level. And right now, for 2023, a substantial level in terms of dollars is defined as $1,470 or more a month. Okay, so that's about, it's about $16,000 or so for a year. Okay, so you have to have the condition of a certain severity, and it has to keep this adult from being able to work at a substantial level. Okay, so we'll go to the next one, number 9. The onset date of a person's disability is something you might hear if you deal with Social Security office. And what that refers to is the earliest date that the person's medical condition meets the requirements in terms of the severity of the condition, okay? And the person was not working above the substantial level. So let's say you have a person who has an impairment and they're working and they're earning $1,100, $1,200 a month. Well, that's not considered to be substantial earnings because it's below $1,470. And that person, in theory, could file an application and never stop working. They could continue to work at that $1,100 or $1,200 level or $1,300 or some figure below $1,470 because we would not consider that to be substantial. So let's go the other way as well. Let's say we have a person who does have a medical impairment, but maybe they're pushing themselves and going to work and they're making over the $1,470. Well, even though their condition medically is severe enough to meet the requirements, until they drop their earnings down below $1,470, they would be denied for SSI. So the onset date would be if you had a person, let's say this year, 2023, January through May, they've been working and making over $1,470. They're doing substantial work, they would not be eligible to collect benefits during that time. Come the month of June, for whatever reason, either they cut their earnings down, maybe their hours are cut, maybe they find they can't continue to work at that level in terms of number of hours per week, per month, whatever, and their earnings drop below the substantial level. Well, now we can establish an onset date because we have a date where they have the medical severity and a date where they've actually dropped the earnings down below. And if it was, let's say it was today, then it would be June the 13th of 2023, okay? All right, Cody, we'll go to 10. And just briefly too, I mentioned that children, of course, cannot work in the sense that an adult would work. So they're not looked at in terms of whether they can perform substantial work, okay? Because most children under 18 are not working. So what the standard is medically for children is how does their impairment affect their ability to do things that a non-impaired child at the same age group would be able to do? How does their impairment affect their activities of daily living? Does this child need a whole lot of help getting dressed? Does this child need help with all kinds of things that a child who's unimpaired at that same age range would be able to do on their own or without assistance? So that's the standard that's applied in terms of determining whether the child is disabled for children under 18. That's how we define children. And then 18 plus, it's all about whether the person can perform work at a substantial level, okay? So now, if we were at the point where someone wanted to file an application and they wanted to do it online, we'll talk about not doing it online in a second, but if they wanted to try it online, for SSI, you can complete the medical portion online. You can start the application. You can give all the information about who has the medical records, where are the evaluations for this young person. You can do that, okay? The non-medical portion will be completed later by the local office by phone or in person. So all the questions about income and assets and who does this person live with, that will be done later. But you can get the ball rolling by completing the medical portion online. Now, this is for an adult claim, okay? So go to the next, we'll go to 11. If you do not want to do it online, you don't have to do it that way. You can do it by setting up an appointment to either have the application taken over the phone, or if you prefer, you can have an application where you go into the office, you set up an in-person appointment. And you would do that by calling our 800 number. You see it there, 1-800-772-1213. You can talk to somebody from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. during the week. And they'll set you up with an appointment day and time. You know, they'll say the Allentown office is going to call you on, you know, Tuesday, June 30th or whatever it might be, and they're going to tell you what time. So you can do it that way. So you can either do it, start it, get it rolling online, or you can just set it up right from the beginning as an in-office or a phone appointment, okay? So we'll go 12. Now, who makes the decision as to whether this young person is disabled? Well, it's not done by the local office. It's not done by Social Security folks. We have a contract with the state of Pennsylvania. I say we being Social Security. We have a contract with the state of Pennsylvania, and their employees are part of what's called the Disability Determination Services. And they are the folks who do the determinations. There's an office in Harrisburg. There's an office in Wilkes-Barre. There's one in Greensburg in Pennsylvania. And they have disability evaluation specialists, physicians who are going to look at the medical evidence, look at the evaluations, and they're the ones that make the determination as to whether this young person meets the requirements for SSI disability. Average processing time in the ballpark of 90 to 100 days. Could be a little sooner, could be a little longer. It sort of depends. But so that claim will go from the local office. It goes up and is sent electronically to the DDS sites, okay? So we'll go 13. So after those few months where the decision is worked on, then if the claim is approved, benefits are usually retroactive to the effective date of the application. And you see that's underlined there. The effective date of an application is generally the month after when you first contact us or when a person meets certain requirements. So if you called us today on June the 13th and you said, I want to have a claim taken for my son or daughter, the application date is going to be July 1st. It's going to move to the next month, okay? So why is that important, or why is that good to know? Well, suppose today was 2 weeks into the future. Instead of being June 13th, today was June 27th. And you said, I want to call, get my son set up for an application, and you're busy with some things and you don't get around to it till the following week. And maybe now we're into the month of July. So when you make the contact in July, that pushes the effective date of the application out to August. So really, particularly in the second half of the month, I'll say, it's important that you contact us as soon as you decide that you want to have this claim taken, okay? Medicaid entitlement is going to coincide with benefit entitlement. So again, the state accepts our determinations on SSI, and they will provide Medicaid automatically once the claim is allowed and benefits are started up, okay? All right,
Richard,
so 14.
Richard, there's a question in the, it says here, since it takes so long for claims to be processed, can a young person apply for SSI before they turn 18, or do they have to wait until they're 18?
Right, that's a good question. I know we had that in advance. This is a little weird. You can apply and get the ball rolling 2 months before the young person turns 18. You can do that. But this is going to sound weird. Most of the time, when the family is waiting for the 18th birthday, it's because the family income and assets are too high to allow this to get paid as a child. So they're waiting till 18. So if you file the 2 months early, we have to get into the parents' income and assets because really it's considered a disabled child's claim. But so you'd have to give that information. They'd have to record it. That's going to push the actual start date for this claim a little further out to after the child turns 18. It's actually going to be a little bit later. But the good thing about doing that if you're willing as parents to give that information, even though it's not going to mean any entitlement right away. The good thing about that is that you get the ball rolling at the DDS, and they will start to develop the claim and use the adult standard to determine if this person is going to be approved. So what it does do, and maybe a little aggravating to do that, to give that information, because ultimately it's not really going to matter, and it just means that this person is going to be denied until they get into the second month or 18. But you get the ball rolling medically. If you don't want to do that, then you actually have to wait until the child turns 18. And the way we do our calculation, as I said, with the effective date, it's going to get pushed out to like when the child's 18 in 2 months. So if you want to get the ball rolling, as they said, because it takes a while to get a medical decision, you can do it a little bit early, but you're going to have to give information about parents' income and assets. And sometimes parents don't want to give that. But we have to make a ruling that they're ineligible at that time, and it's going to be only when they turn 18 are they going to get paid. So it's kind of a weird government technicality, but yeah, you can look into that.
And then there's one more question, Richard.
Yeah.
Can I apply on behalf of my sons who have autism? Or do the, like,
I'm not trying to understand.
I guess I think what she's asking, we have some families that we work with who their children are nonverbal, they can't read or write, so they apply for them. Can she apply on behalf of her sons that have autism?
Yeah, I mean, she can like provide the information. She can answer the questions. Ultimately, they have to get some type of, if the child can sign, they have to get some stuff they have to get signed by the child. But certainly, they can answer all the questions and start that ball rolling. Yes.
Okay, thanks.
That happens fairly often, to tell you the truth.
Okay, that's it for now.
Okay, all right, okay, very good. So, so if the claim is allowed, the DDS is going to let the local office know, hey, this person's approved, and then the local office is going to get in touch with the family, and they're going to want to update the file, because a lot of times in the initial application, we don't really get into all the nitty gritty about all kinds of things, income and assets. There's some things, or in the living arrangement, there's some things that we kind of let go. And then once an approval comes in, then they're going to want to update. Because remember, it's a couple months have passed now. So they have to make certain that there hasn't been any changes that we're unaware of, things like that. So that's what would happen there. If the claim is denied, you have 60 days upon receiving the denial notice in the mail to file a first level of appeal, which is a reconsideration. Under a reconsideration, we will update the file with if there's any new medical evidence or evaluations that you want added to the file. The claim will go back to the DDS, and a whole different team of folks who did not work on the first decision will work on the second decision. But that's probably going to take another, 60 days, 90 days, whatever, to make a reconsideration decision. I mean, the good thing is that it keeps the claim active, and if the claim is approved at that level, most likely the person is going to be paid back to the original application date. If you let more than 60 days lapse, you come in and you don't really have a good reason why you did that, then a lot of times you're starting from scratch. And if you're approved on the second application, they're only going to pay you as of that particular effective application date. So it's always good to keep these appeals going. And you see there, past the reconsideration level, there are 3 other levels of appeal that remain. Hearing before administrative law judge. You don't have to go to that in person, but you could if you wanted to. There's an appeals council review. If the hearing is denied, the appeals council review is down in the Washington, D.C. area. You don't have to go there. And then if that is denied, you could, in theory, file a lawsuit in federal court. So these are the levels of appeal that are available to people. And again, we recommend that you file an appeal if you think the decision was wrong, which of course you would. Okay, so we'll go next one. All right, so I don't know, we don't have any questions now because we're going to move into working for people that are already been approved for benefits. So no question other than those we talked about, correct?
Yep, that's correct.
Okay. So now we're going to talk about what happens when a person's on benefits and they want to get a job. How does that affect benefits? So we're going to talk about the work incentive program. We're going to talk about a publication I think is good for you to have, the Red Book, or at least consult. and then a little bit about the Ticket to Work program. So we'll go to 16 there. So for an SSI recipient going to work, anybody who attended the Social Security one last week, there's a number of provisions that apply to Social Security disability. For SSI, it's much more of strictly a math game. There's no issue of substantial earnings. So once someone who's gotten on SSI been approved, they later want to go back to work, that issue of $1,470 a month has no bearing on anything. Okay, it doesn't mean whether they will or will not get a check. However, because SSI is a needs-based program, earnings are going to reduce payments. Okay, so you have income coming in now, this new income that's going to have to be figured into how much SSI you can get. And but benefits will continue as long as the income and asset limits are not totally exceeded. Okay, so we're going to talk about that. So we'll go 17. So how do earnings reduce SSI? Well, one of the good things is that earnings are counted differently against a person's SSI, differently than unearned income would count. So you remember in the beginning, we had an example of someone who gets $700 Social Security. Pretty much other than $20 exclusion, that's deducted dollar for dollar. But if you're working, it's not that type of calculation. It's not a dollar for dollar deduction. What happens is that you have what's called a work exclusion, which is the first $65 a person would earn in a month. That comes right off the top. And if the person doesn't have any other income, they didn't use that $20 general exclusion that we talked about for unearned income in the beginning. If they didn't use that, then the person would get an $85 exclusion. So the third bullet there, they're going to subtract either $65 or $85 from the person's monthly gross earnings. That's the first thing we do. Half of what's left over is going to count against the SSI for that particular month. So you see at the bottom in blue there, if a person earns $600 at a job, that's gross earnings, they don't have any other income but SSI, we would exclude $85 right off the top from the 600. So that would leave $515, okay? Half of $515, which is $257.50, is now going to be how much the SSI benefit is going to be cut by for a person making $600. So it's not, there you see, they make $600 gross. Now, granted, that's gross. That includes their taxes and all. So it's not take home, but nonetheless, $600 gross is going to result in that person losing $257.50 in SSI. But the end result is that they have more money working than they would if they were not working. And sometimes I know when I was a claims rep, a lot of times folks who were on SSI, when they would come in the office, I'm talking adults now, they would say, I have an opportunity for a job. This is what they say they would pay me. How is that going to impact my SSI? And we would run through this computation, because it's been this computation forever. We would run through this computation, and a lot of times the folks would just focus on the fact that, wow, I'm going to have my SSI cut by $257. And we would try to explain that, or emphasize that doesn't matter where your money's coming from. The fact of the matter is, by working, you're going to end up with more money than not working. So this is the way the SSI computation is done for earnings, okay? For earnings.
Richard,
all right,
Richard, we have a question in the chat. I have an adult with an intellectual disability, Down syndrome. He is already receiving SSI. We have not applied for SNAP for him as of this time. If he is eligible for SNAP, would the SNAP dollars benefits lower his SSI amount he receives per month? Is SNAP considered an asset?
Yeah, the answer to that is completely no. SNAP has no effect on SSI at all.
Okay, and
don't worry about that.
Good. And then we have another question. Workers on SSI don't contribute to Social Security, right? That's not subtracted from their paycheck.
No. If they're working at a job, it's most likely that they're going to have Social Security deductions, FICA deductions. So, I mean, almost 100% of the jobs in this country, I'd say like 95, 96% are covered by Social Security. So, in theory, unless they're in some type of special situations where it isn't taxed that way, but most likely, if it's a regular job, they're going to be taxed. So what was the second part of that? They're going to get taxed, most likely.
And then that's not subtracted from their paycheck.
Well, again, this formula is going to be what's used here. Okay, so the gross earnings, including the FICA tax, are going to count in that figure I have there. And in that example, that's $600. You know, that's not their take-home pay. That's whatever their gross was. So that's what's going to be the number that we're going to use, the gross amount. But I mean, and this, you bring up another point though, in a roundabout way too. Remember, as a person who's on SSI works, assuming they are paying the Social Security, the FICA taxes, they're in time, if they continue to work over a period of, you know, a few years even, they're in time, they're building up their Social Security record in terms of their earnings there. And that could mean that they can get on SSDI in time, because a young person only needs like about 1.5 years of work to get on SSDI.
Thank you.
So somebody says, thanks for clarifying. Yeah, I mean, the person who's working, most likely, whether they're getting SSI or not, they're paying the full range of taxes that, you know, a person who's not on SSI would be paying. Okay, we good? Okay, we'll go 18. Now, I put this up here just to give you a sense of what the earnings cutoff limit would be. Not that particularly a person on SSI just starting out would be paid this much, but just so you know, an earnings of $1,913 or more in a particular month, that's gross, would result in no SSI cash payable. And you see the example there to the left in blue. Person earns $1,913 in a month. We would take off the $85. That leaves them with $1,828. Remember, half of the remainder counts against SSI. So half of $1,828 is $914. Bottom in red, the SSI limit is $914. Their countable income is $914. It comes out to zero, no SSI payable. They would, however, have their Medicaid, and of course they have their $1,828 in terms of you know, money that way. So just wanted to let you know, just to give you a sense of it. So $1,913 in a month, you want to multiply that by 12, you know, that's going to be like a little bit under $24,000 or so a person would have to be starting out, where they would lose their SSI completely. Okay, so just wanted to give you that figure, but we go by monthly earnings. Okay, and I mentioned they would keep Medicaid. If a person had earnings too high to allow SSI payment, okay, which we just saw, Medicaid is still going to continue. And it's even a higher figure here. Medicaid will still continue if the person's yearly earnings don't exceed the Pennsylvania threshold. There's a state threshold on Medicaid set by every state. In Pennsylvania, the earnings would have to be $49,565 or more in a calendar year for a person to lose their Medicaid. So there should be almost no fear that anybody on SSI who goes to work, unless they're going to make a lot of money, that they would lose their Medicaid. And I don't have it here, but even if the person exceeded $49,565, we would do what's called an individualized threshold figure with that individual and find out what their medical expenses are and a whole bunch of other things. And so most likely, even if they exceed this, when we do this extra step, they wouldn't lose their Medicaid there either. So just want to sort of allay people's fears about losing Medicaid because of work. Okay. Okay, we'll go 20. If a person is working and they're a student, they meet certain requirements we're going to talk about here, then they get an additional break on how much their work would impact their SSI. So the work exclusion for a student on SSI applies if the student is under age 22 and in regular school attendance. In that case, if they were working and they were on SSI, we can exclude up to $2,220 in a month. $2,220 in a month can be excluded, completely taken off the top. And therefore they would get full SSI. However, in a calendar year, this year, 2023, the most they could earn would be $8,950 that we would take off the top. That would be excluded. So if the person went and made $9,000 or so, some of that's going to be counted against their SSI. So you have this monthly amount, which 2220 times 4, you want to look at that, it's like 8880. And then they still have a little bit of money left over. So somebody who's a younger person who's working in school attendance, they would get a break on what would be charged against them on SSI.
There's a question. Is that okay if I?
Yeah,
okay. So if SSI recipients work over the SGA income for more than 1 year and is considered to be overpaid, he stops.
Hold on.
Okay.
Oh, just want to back up. Remember, SGA is not an issue for SSI. That 1470 doesn't matter once you get on SSI. It's a matter of how much you're earning and doing this calculation that we've gone through. But go ahead with the question.
Okay, no problem. This person said he stopped receiving SSI because of the overpayment and continues to provide his pay stubs to Social Security. If his income is reduced below SDI, will his SSI be automatically restated? Will he start receiving benefits again?
Okay, so the issue here is, first of all, let's go over that again. That SGA figure of 1470 is only a factor when the person's initially applying for SSI. So when you first apply for SSI, you can't be working and making 1470 or more. Once you get approved for SSI, and generally you can't really return to work in the first like 6 months or so, because that would call into question your decision. So let's say this is like a year in. Once you're a year in or so, it's strictly a matter of going through this calculation. So you could be making more than 1470. And the only reason your benefit would be reduced is because we would run through that calculation that we talked about, taking 85 or 65 off the top and then dividing the remainder in half. So it's not a matter of SGA. It's of the SGA. It's a matter of how much are they earning. We run through the computation. Does that allow them to get paid? And the answer is that person keeps submitting the pay stubs on time, or the family does, assuming we're doing our job at Social Security and promptly recording that on the record. In theory, that should prevent an overpayment. Now, sometimes things happen. Sometimes a family might be a little late getting us this pay stub. Sometimes we're a little late adding them onto the record. You know, it could be either way. But ultimately, there could be an overpayment if we haven't had every figure right up front. And also, let's face it this way, too. Sometimes, unless a person makes exactly the same amount of money in every paycheck, it could be an issue there that they were up or down. Sometimes we owe them, sometimes they owe us. So there's a bunch of factors that come into play. But the bottom line is, changes in the monthly earnings, we should be able to fix that as soon as we make the computer input. So the person could be up and down. We'll talk a little bit about that now as we go through, but they could be up and down, no problem. So forget about the SGA for SSI folks once they're on. Okay? It's sort of a math game for SSI, basically what it comes down to. Okay, so yeah, we're going to go to, what was 20 there, Cody? That was, yeah, we did, that's the students. Okay, so we'll go to 21. 21 is the Red Book, which some of you folks may be familiar with. The Red Book is sort of an overview publication. And it's a good bit of pages. It might be like 90 pages or so. It has both Social Security and SSI work incentives, the things we're talking about now. And you can view it online at our website. You can see where those arrows are. I pointed out where it talks about what's new in the current version for 2023. If you wanted to get a printed publication, you can order it there. You can have it sent to you, or you can look at it online. It's up to you. I don't think you want to print it out because it's like I said, it's a lot of pages, or maybe just want certain sections to print out. But I think this is something, if you have somebody who's involved with work and you're wondering about different work incentives and things, good publication to have on hand. Okay, we'll go 22. All right, so the last couple are about the Ticket to Work program. You've probably heard of that. The Ticket to Work program is something that's open to disability recipients, both for Social Security and SSI, ages 18 to 64. And what it does is that we have providers that have been approved by the government, and they will provide free services to folks who want to use their ticket, want to say, I want to be involved with this program. It's a voluntary program. So they provide various services. It could be career counseling, both rehab, job training, job placement. It could be resume writing. It could be whatever a person might need. You would find a particular company that signed up for the Ticket to Work, and you would say, I want to send my ticket to them, and I want to work with them. It's a voluntary program. No one has to do it. There's no consequences if you don't do it. If you start it and you don't like it and you want to get out of it, you can do that. There's no consequences there. It is designed in the long run to help people become self-sufficient, meaning get off of benefits. That's the goal. But you know, that'll probably take a while. But nonetheless, you have the opportunity to do this. So we'll go next one. And where do you start with this? Well, there's a Ticket to Work helpline. You see it there. We also have, even though there's information on our website, ssa.gov, we also have a sort of a separate work site on Ticket to Work called Choose Work. And there you see choosework.ssa.gov. And what you can do there, which is a lot of people I think find helpful, there is a section called Find Help, which is a tool to help you search based on where you live, what your zip code is. Search for what's called employment networks. These are the providers that are going to make services available. And you can say, okay, you know, my son or daughter has autism. You know, what company might be work best with folks who have autism, things like that. Or you might have a certain distance you're willing to travel if you want to do this in person. Some of it's virtual, some of it's in person. There might be 20 companies for your county that provide services, and then you would just kind of go through that. So you can do this search on there, browse around on this Choose Work. So I think, Cody, is that our last one? I think that's our last slide. Okay.
Yep, that was the last slide. So thank you for that.